Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for Infinite Lagrange. This video is sponsored by NetEase, and I hope you folks are all enjoying the game as much as I am. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about aircraft, what they are, what is meant by the term aircraft, how you use them, how you build them, basically everything you need to know to start using them, because this is one of the questions I have been asked most about Infinite Lagrange. How do I actually use these aircraft? And I've seen a lot of new players launching ships that use aircraft without any of them, and people sitting there and building aircraft and not knowing what to do with them. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's video. Now, if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, please let me know by hitting a like on it, slap that subscribe button for everything you need to know about Infinite Lagrange, make sure that you ding the notification bell and tap on all notifications so that you never miss an upload. If you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel as well, I do have a Patreon page that you can come and support. It's a great way to learn about my life in Africa if you're interested in that side of thing, and you can earn some merchandise the longer you are subscribed to that. Talking of merchandise as well, we do have a dedicated Redbubble merchandise store, so make sure that you check that out. Links for all of that and more in the description below. With all of that said and done though, let's talk about aircraft in Infinite Lagrange, what they are and how they work. So first and foremost then, what do I actually mean when I say aircraft? Well, annoyingly, it actually depends where you're reading it and where you're talking about it, because currently in the game, aircraft is often misused as a specific thing, which is a little bit confusing, but we'll cover that as we go. For the most part, if we jump into our ship blueprints and scroll to the bottom, when the game refers to aircrafts, it's referring to either of the subdivisions here of corvette or as fighter, although infuriatingly there are times where the term fighter and aircraft are used completely interchangeably, whereas there are other times where the term aircraft is used to cover corvettes and fighters collectively. So that gets a bit confusing. Be aware of it, and I will highlight it later as we go throughout the video. The easiest way to tell the difference between a corvette and a fighter, of course, is based on the icon on the left-hand side. Corvettes use that broken pyramid, whereas fighters have the three triangular dots. For in-game terms, the main difference between a fighter and a corvette, other than which ships can launch them, because yes, these aren't just added to a fleet, more on that later, but also how they actually operate. Corvettes are individual ships. If we have a look at the CV-003 light corvette, or however the heck you want to pronounce that code name, this is an individual ship. When you build these, you are building one corvette, which will then fly around and do its thing. In the case of the CV-003, this is a multi-role type. It is capable, as you'll see here, of shooting at destroyers, frigates, and cruisers. It's one of the earliest ships you'll get access to that does have a dedicated cruiser attack priority, which is pretty sweet. Now, the CV-003 is also available guaranteed in your server starting blueprint box. That big one that comes with a load of different ships will have this in it. Guaranteed. It's the corvette that you are absolutely guaranteed to get, and it's not a bad little ship. As far as corvettes go, its tank is pretty average, its firepower is actually not too bad at all, and the fact that it's got that target priority there against cruisers does really help out early on, when you can build the ships to field it. Again, more on that in a moment. The other type, though, are fighters. Fighters do not come in that standard blueprint box. You can only find these through generic blueprint crates and black market blueprint crates. So do be aware of that, and the drop rate can sometimes be infuriatingly low. On one of my servers, I still only have one type of aircraft, despite now having carriers unlocked, which is mind-bendingly infuriating. But hey, there we go. Here I've got three different types, and these actually showcase quite nicely why I love fighters. The Newland is just a generic fighter. This is a multi-role type heavy attacker. It has anti-aircraft capabilities and it has anti-ship capabilities. And interestingly enough as well, like the CV-003, this one has a cruiser attack priority in it, which is really helpful alongside its anti-aircraft capabilities. Now, you might be looking at those firepower stats and saying, my goodness, those are really low. Why on earth would I ever use one of these? Well, that's because fighters come in groups. They come in squadrons. When you build a corvette, you're building one corvette. When you load a corvette into a ship, you're loading one corvette. When you load some Newlands, you're loading 3 or 5, however many it is. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll showcase that later. Annoyingly, there is nowhere in the information here that will actually tell you how many there are in an individual squadron, as far as I can tell. If you've spotted that, please let me know and I'll add it as a pinned topic, a pinned comment in the comment section down below. But just be aware that the fighters do come as squadrons, not just individual ships. I've also unlocked the Spore A404, which is a dedicated anti-aircraft fighter, and the SC002, which is one of my favourite fighters in the entire game. The firepower stats on this look absolutely abysmal, but that's because it's got one heck of a trick up its sleeve. It has an electronic recon system that allows you to jam your opponent's weapons, making it harder for them to hit the rest of your ships. That alone just warrants an inclusion of this in my fleets. I love it to pieces. I've also got, in terms of corvettes, the CV-MO11, which is a heavy missile corvette, and the Silent Assassin, which is a heavy armoured one. I don't really like the Silent Assassin all that much, but I do quite enjoy the CV-MO11. Anyway, we've hinted at it a few times now. I think it's important to point out that aircraft are not added to your fleet in the same way that other ships are. If you were to go to create a fleet and then have a look in your rapid formation, for example, you will not find aircraft here. They just do not appear on this list. You cannot just add them to a fleet and be done with it. And you might have spotted here that the series aircraft destroyer actually does give us a little bit of a clue towards this. So how do you actually build one of these? How do you field aircraft in your fleet? Let's jump back into the blueprints. First and foremost, as you're going through that first generic blueprint box that unlocks all those cool ships early on, one of the ones you will unlock is the AC-721 Heavy Logistics Destroyer, and you will unlock both the generic type and the aircraft type. Now, despite this being called an aircraft type, it can only launch corvettes. This is one of the times when the game is referring to corvettes and fighters both as aircraft. When it says aircraft type, it means it can launch some variety of aircraft. In this case, with the AC-721, it is only corvettes. If we actually have a look, it does have a corvette maintenance system here with some interesting upgrades that will allow it to increase the lock-on speed. One of the ones that it says here is the RTB cooldown. That is the return to battle cooldown. Basically, your fighters will go out, or your corvettes in this case, will go out, do their thing, shooting or defending or whatever it is they're designed to do. Then they will eventually need to come back to the ship they launched from, dock for a moment whilst they reload all their ammo and fuel and stuff like that, and then they return to battle and continue doing what they're doing. That is the RTB cooldown. Nowhere does it tell you exactly what that cooldown is, but if you reduce this, it gives your corvettes more time on the field. You've got things like direct damage upgrades, increases their lock-on speed so they start shooting sooner, and increases their hit rate, things like this. Of course, you can have a look at this in your own time and figure out what upgrades you might like to add onto there. I don't bother really upgrading the actual weapon system on an aircraft ship just because the main power is in the aircraft themselves. If we actually open the combat roles here as well, just in case you're not sure whether it uses corvettes or or fighters or both, what type of aircraft it uses, it explicitly states here in the information page under roles that it's a back row ship, which most aircraft launching ship are, which offers them a certain layer of protection, but also explicitly states carries corvettes. Not fighters, just corvettes. Now, the other one that you will get as part of that generic blueprint box early on, the one that allows you to unlock tons of different ships, is the KCCP V2.0. This comes again in two flavours. You've got the integrated type and the aircraft type. And if we actually have a look at the bottom hiding here, it says aircraft loading system. Now, the clue is in the icon here at the bottom left with those three little triangles. When this says aircraft loading system, this time it's using the generic term aircraft to refer to solely fighters. If we open the info page here again, you'll see it's a back row cruiser and it is an aircraft type. Aircraft here only means fighters. You cannot load corvettes into the KCCP V2.0 light aircraft cruiser aircraft type. It is not possible. Now, those are the two ones that you are guaranteed to get. They're not the only ones that can launch aircraft. Here, for example, under destroyers, I have the Ceres, which is a really cool ship. I love the look of this thing, and it's really quite a powerful ship. If we go into its roles here, you will see that it is back row, special type, and it uses aircraft. Again, here the term aircraft means fighters, and I'm hoping this is something Nettie's correct. So maybe if you unlock the series, by the time you look at this, it will say fighters here, not just aircraft. Though there are some that can do both. Now, just before we talk about this particular ship, it's worth noting that some people will colloquially use the term carriers to refer to any ship that can launch aircraft. So the AC-721, the KCCP V2.0 also would be carriers in their eyes. The term carrier technically responds only to this particular subdivision of vessel type. It's above battlecruiser, we have carriers. Now I've got here the CV3000. You can also find things like the Solar Whale and that in boxes. Again, none of these are guaranteed drops as of yet. These are things that you'll find in blueprint boxes. Now, interestingly enough, this one, if we go into its combat roles here, you'll notice that not only does it say back row and aircraft, but it also explicitly states carries corvettes. Again, where it says aircraft, that is using the wrong word for fighters. It's saying fighters and corvettes. This ship can launch both, as we'll see in a moment. So the first thing you really should notice here is that all of these are launched from destroyers or larger ships, which means, of course, if you want to use aircraft, you're going to need to have destroyers unlocked. Fortunately, destroyers unlock very early on in your base. In fact, if we scroll all the way up, you'll see here at base level 3, you have the destroyer dockyard there. So that's when you can start building things like the AC-721, though I wouldn't. I would wait at this point, because you'll notice that it's all the way up at tech level 5, base level 5, that we get the aircraft assembly line. And if we tap on that one, you'll see here, that unlocks the aircraft shipyard and increases the maximum aircraft hangar capacity. That is a key point. You do not get the ability to build aircraft until base level 5. It's only at base level 5 that you can build aircraft, so if you've built any AC-721 aircraft types, they are effectively useless until you reach base level 5. Once you then hit base level 6, you can also start building cruisers. The KCCP V2.0 is a great little cruiser there for using your aircraft, and then after that, it's only once you hit tech level 8 that you've already unlocked the super capital shipyard, you can then unlock the carrier dockyard as well in order to start building those carriers. Just well worth noting there, as I said, the big one there is that the aircraft assembly line only comes online at base level 5. If you're not at base level 5, there is no point building any aircraft type ships because you cannot actually build the aircraft to put in them. Now, talking about putting aircraft in ships brings us nicely to how you actually fit these into a fleet. Because if we go to create fleet and we open up our rapid formation, you can see all of these different ship types, but then it stops. Where are the fighters? Where are the corvettes? Well, they're not there. You do not add these directly to a fleet. They are not capable of proper warp transport. They do have to be carried inside other vessels. So if we go into ship management, and then we find one of these types on here, so for example, I've got a load of series aircraft destroyers. If I tap on one of these, you'll see here that it says aircraft. I can then tap on this, and it'll give me the menu where I can bring these in and out. So I can take out that SC022, and I can put in a B192 Newland. Also, a good point to note here is the ×3 and ×5. This is the only place in the game where I have found that actually tells you how many ships are in, how many fighters are in a particular squadron. So you can see, like here, the B192 Newland has ×3, which means it has 3 aircraft per squadron. So if I had here Newland and Newland, this is going to launch a total of 6 Newland into space. Whereas if I were to put the spores in, for example, I need to drag these out and then put the other ones in. It annoys me you can't just drag and straight swap. But there we are. I would have 5 Spore A404s per slot, so it's going to launch 10 of those into space. Now in this case, I actually quite wanted that to have the SC002 because I love that little fighter to pieces. Again, those come in squadrons of 5. So that's how you load one of these ships, and that works the same whether it's a carrier or whether it's a cruiser. But just to demonstrate as well, let's come out a little bit further. I'm going to actually jump into one of my fleets. I'm then going to pull up the carrier here. You can do this directly from the fleet interface as well. You'll see here that the carriers have the capability, as it says, of corvettes and of aircraft, and you can kind of choose which ones you put in there. But of course, it is a number of slots limited to each individual type. I can't put aircraft into the corvette hangar, and I can't I'm doing it now. I can't put fighters into the corvette hangar, and I can't put corvettes into the large aircraft hangar. That is a key point there. It's also useful to bear that in mind when you are upgrading these ships, that for the carriers, it may have enhancements that explicitly state it increases the damage of corvettes or increases the damage of aircraft or fighters. In that case, it'll be just fighters it's referring to, or just corvettes, etc. And it's just worth bearing in mind the different types that those can actually have inside them. The same would go here if I had any of those KCC PV2 cruisers. I just haven't got any built at the moment because I like having my my destroyer fleets, and my vanguards there are basically Cassos alongside Spear of Uranus, ST-59s, and a couple of carriers in there as well. That's where I get my aircraft for. If I'm using a carrier, a dedicated carrier, I don't see why I'd necessarily want a KCC PV 2.0 unless I needed to field more aircraft. Obviously, the amount of points that an aircraft carrier takes up, the carriers are like 40, the CV3000 is like 40 fleet points, whereas a KCC PV 2.0 is only, I think, 16 fleet points. So if you needed more aircraft than corvettes, that's one way that you could do it. If we go into ship production, obviously you'll see here that having reached the prerequisite tech level of 5 to build aircraft, you get the aircraft shipyard. These do not, the tech points at the top right here, do not count towards your standard fleet's tech point. If you have, if I come back out here and look at the top of the screen here, you can see my military port is 900 out of 900. Aircraft do not count towards that. They have their own hangar, which is at the top right here, currently 75 out of 84. But annoyingly, due to the drop rate of aircraft in blueprint boxes, you'll see even though I have maximized the ships in active service of all of my different aircraft types, I still haven't maximized my carrier, the actual hangar capacity. It's easier to upgrade your hangar than it is to unlock new aircraft, which is infuriating at this point in time, but hey, it's part and parcel of the game. The final thing to note about aircraft is in regards to base defense. If you come into your base defense, you can actually set up defensive aircraft, and you can hit deploy aircraft here at the bottom and fill in all of these different slots. Now, interestingly, this is where aircraft is used as the catch-all term. As you can see, I've got some silent assassins in there, I've got some Newlands, some spores. This is kind of where I put most of my spare aircraft, just in case anyone decides to attack my base. I've got a fleet of aircraft there that are going to come out and do their thing. Let's drop that CVMO11 back into slot there, and you'll see that it is literally, it can be either. In the case of base defense, you can fill that with aircraft, as in fighters, or you can fill it with corvettes, which is really, really useful. And that, again, comes as part of your upgrades. If we open up the base upgrade menu here, you'll see where is it hiding. Just got to find the right bit. At tech level 5, the Airspace Defense Command Center enables you to guard operations to defend against enemy fleets, and you can start to increase that later on with some of the upgrades later. I can't remember exactly which ones it is. Might be the Field Command Center. Nope, it might just come under the standard, the aircraft hangars and things like that. There we are, aircraft hangar capacity and all these kind of things. But anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea of what aircraft are, how you might use those, and what kind of cool effects they have. For me, I really love aircraft, especially, well, I'd say especially in big fleets. I love them in my small fleets as well. As you can see, I've got a full stock there of series, all using their aircraft. I love aircraft. They're such an interesting unit to field, especially since a lot of opponents don't necessarily field much in the way of anti-aircraft capability, which can be hilarious. You can sit there and go up against an enemy fleet and it's just got tons of destroyers and anti-cruisers and stuff like this, but your aircraft go completely unopposed and just wreak absolute havoc behind enemy lines. Because remember, most aircraft launching ships are rear row ships, which means they have all the protection of basically everything else having to be destroyed first. If you've got destroyers in your front and mid row, and you've got aircraft launching destroyers like the series in your back row, and the enemy fleet has destroyer preference, it's going to shoot all the front row ones and all of the middle row ones first before it really starts to do anything to your series. That does mean that obviously enemy aircraft might go for the back rows as a bit of a priority if they want to go after these kind of things, but that's where you have your own anti-aircraft capability. This is also where ships like the Carillion that otherwise don't have much use do come in pretty handy, along with one that I do just want to talk about very briefly before we go, just because it's a little bit of a show-off here. If we go all the way down to the Mare Tranquillitatis, which, by the way, is actually named after one of the seas, in inverted commas, on the moon, the Sea of Tranquility. This is a dedicated anti-aircraft type, the Pulse Cannon, and if you look at the amount of damage this can do, 4,105, upgrade its defensive Pulse Cannon system to be able to just increasing hit chance. This thing will melt through enemy aircraft like you won't believe. So if you're lucky enough to have a Pulse Cannon, Mare Tranquillitatis, build these if you're struggling against enemy aircraft. enhance them purely for their aircraft hit chance against corvettes and fighters, and then just watch as your enemy's aircraft fly over your fleet and just get blown into tiny pieces of shrapnel. Anyway folks, that covers everything I wanted to talk about here today in regards to aircraft. Hopefully that's given you an idea of when you should start building these, what kind of ships you can fit them to, and how they might integrate into your fleet. Again, just bear in mind that if you're going up against opponents that don't have much in the way of anti-aircraft, then aircraft become an incredibly potent tool. Bear it in mind. Good luck using that. Thanks for watching this one right the way to the end, folks. Happy sailing, and see you in Infinite Lagrange.